Today I want to do a bit of a review on one of the most popular rangefinders of all time, and certainly one of the most popular rangefinders, modern rangefinders, and that's the Leica M6. So I've got a fair bit of experience with the Leica M6. This is actually my fifth camera, the fifth M6 I've had. I've had them for a lot of years. So I want to do a review of it, but I want to suggest tips to look for if you're buying an M6. So if you're in the market for an M6 and you're going to go to, let's use eBay as a source, but maybe KEH is where you want to buy it. Anyways, eBay or KEH, kind of what are the things that they're telling you? What does it actually mean? And how can you do a better job of buying a better camera for yourself? Now, the first thing that you want to realize is the M6 has quite a history. It's been around a long time. So I'm recording this in 2024. The camera came out in 1984. So basically, it's been on and off again for 40 plus years. And a lot of those early cameras that you could buy, maybe you see them on eBay, they're 40 years old. So is that what you want, a 40-year-old camera? Well, maybe. You know, they're probably a smart buy today. A lot of people would consider the M6 a better camera than the current MP. The MP is more of a collector's camera. The M6 is kind of a user's camera. And, you know, some people will consider the M6 better. Maybe it's a lot cheaper, so maybe it's better value for sure, in some people's views. I have an M6. I have an MP. You know, each have their advantages. Now, this camera is my fifth M6. Now, does that make me an expert? It only makes me an expert in shooting with an M6. I am not a collector. I have no cameras in a collection. So if you're looking for an M6 and you're thinking, I want a piece of history, I want something that I'm going to put on a shelf and I'm going to look at it and I'm going to enjoy it, and every couple of months I'm going to fire the shutter and listen to that beautiful shutter go off and the quietness. Of course, it's not as quiet as my current Sony shutters, which make zero noise. Anyways, if you're a collector, then I probably don't have the answers for you because I'm a user, and I think those two are a very different group. So let me tell you what I would look for as a user M6. Now, if you're looking at eBay or KEH, or you're looking for a camera, the first thing you want to consider is what color am I going to get? They come in two colors. Originally, 1984, they came in black chrome. Now, black chrome was kind of a new product. It came out on the M4P, had black chrome as well, maybe the M5, I'm not sure. But previous to that, like the M4s and that, they were brass. And they got this amazing brassing. And if you love that amazing brassing where the edges are worn off and the brass shows through and it looks like you've just come out of the jungle and it's fantastic, wow, what a photographer I am. The M6 is not going to do that because it's not brass, it's zinc. So the first thing that you have to realize is that there's black chrome and silver chrome. But when it came out in 84, there was only black chrome. And the black chrome is nice. It's held up well. It doesn't get that brassing that like an M4 would get. Like if you think of Jim Marshall's M4 and this beautiful patina of the brassing, it's nice now, but people hated it at the time. Like that was where you didn't want to have as a camera that was all brassed and rough looking. I mean, you had to go on assignment. You couldn't have a beat up looking camera like that. Anyways, it's changed now. Things change. They always change. So now that brassing is ideal. Maybe even sand a little bit of it off, you know, make a little more brassing because you don't really use the camera. Anyways, so the M6 comes in black. Now, originally, it never had these little plastic kind of lugs here that prevented the strap from scratching the camera. So that was the first update. There's been a lot of updates, probably 5 or so updates to the M6 over its 40-year period. And they've also had a lot of special issues. Now, a special issue is not an update. And if I was a collector, I would probably be interested more in a special issue than I would just a regular M6. There's a lot of special issues. Some have dragon emblems on them. Some have countries, the border of countries. There's special issues for the Leica Historical Society. All of these things. I counted, it depends how you count your special issues, but there's either 22 or 30 special issues of the Leica M6. But the first ones were black, and then black chrome, and then the silver chrome came out maybe in 1986. So I kind of got involved a couple of years after they'd come out. I worked at a newspaper full-time as a photographer, and we had an intern come in, and he had an old MP, and I didn't have a lot of experience with Leica, basically no experience with Leica at that time, and he showed me his M3, and I thought, well, I wouldn't mind getting one of these. Like, this kind of looks cool. I don't want an old one, but maybe there's something new. So I bought the M6 when it came out. I paid $1,900 for a brand new Leica M6 Black. Probably this is like 86, 87. I bought it at Fairview Photo in Brantford, Ontario, brand new, and $1,900. I was probably, like, minimum wage was probably $3 or $4. I was probably making twice that. I was probably making like $8 an hour. And you figure out how much $1,900 is when you're making $8 an hour. Plus I got a house, plus I got a wife and kids. Like, I mean, it took a lot of time, and this was a big purchase for me. A $1,900 camera in '86, big purchase. Anyways, the camera comes out. I bought a black one. I kind of liked it. You couldn't go buy with one camera. You had to have two cameras. Now, in the newspapers I worked at, we shot color and black and white. So, and when we shot color, it was chrome, like slides, like Ektachrome or Fujichrome. Maybe in theory there could be Kodachrome, but you couldn't wait 4 or 5 days to get film processed. So I would put the chrome film in the chrome camera and the black and white film in the black camera. That's why I had a chrome and a black. Now my first two were stolen from my desk at the newspaper, and the newspaper had insurance, so they bought me 2 replacement used ones. So I had the first black and chrome, and then I had the second black and silver. So I had those first 4, and I used them for years, and they were great. And then I switched to being a sports photographer. And at the time, photographers didn't have the kind of money where you do now, where you could hold on to your old cameras. Like, we traded our cameras in to buy the next latest greatest. So I traded all my Leica stuff against 400-2.8 because I had kind of switched in my mind to being a sports photographer. So I had the Leicas, 2 were stolen. I bought 2 more. Eventually traded those against 400-2.8. And then years later, about 15 years ago, off eBay, I bought this M6. So this is really my 5th one. I had a CL in there for a while, and the CL, interesting, the film CL, one of my college teachers had a couple of CLs, and his work was great. And that was really the very first time I'd heard of the brand, because he had a couple of CLs. And then this internship guy came to the newspaper, and that's where I saw an M3. So that's my history. I've had this camera, as I said, for about maybe 15 years. I'm going to sell it. I'm going to put it on eBay. I'm going to put that in the description. This video is what to look for in an M6. It's not, you should buy my M6. And I'm going to post it. I'm going to put it in the description. Maybe you want to bid on it. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're watching this a month after I've sold, a year after, 5 years after I've sold it. So anyways, I'm happy to be selling this one, but I'm going to just talk about what to look for in the M6 itself. So they come in black, chrome, silver chrome. They actually came in a titanium as well. What year was that? That was like, I don't know. They made them for a few years, from like 92 to maybe 98, the titanium, the M6 titanium. And it wasn't really titanium, but it had a thin coat of titanium on the surface, and it looked titanium. Now, that I would call that a collector's item, and it's not because the titanium's not great. The camera's fully functional, but it had ostrich leather, and the ostrich leather would wear out if you used it. Leather wears out better than this durable material, which looks like leather but is not. Anyways, the M6 titanium had ostrich leather. It was a beautiful camera, but it's a put it on the shelf camera, I would say. I mean, I'm sure there's people disagree with me, and they're out there shooting with their M6T all the time, but you have to admit the leather kind of looks a little beaten up. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's how you like it. I don't know. Everyone's mileage may vary. Now, the other thing, as I mentioned, they had these plastic lugs added. That was the first upgrade. And then around 87, they had the very same camera, and they made it, it's called, and you would see this on eBay, the M6, the big M6. Now this says Leica M6. You can see it on the detail. But they came out for a year or so with just M6, similar to how the M7 says just M7. So there's the big M6, and that's what it means. Same camera inside. I wouldn't call it a special issue. It was an upgrade, just said M6, and then they went back to saying Leica. So if you see on eBay, the camera is called the Big M6. That's what they're talking about. It just has the bigger print, same camera inside. Something to watch for. And at least you know about what those came out. Those came out in around 87, so at least you know how old the camera is. Now, whether your camera is the regular Leica M6 or the Big M6, there's a chart that you could Google, and it shows by serial number when your camera was manufactured. So this Leica, the one that I'm selling, is it was made January 17th, 1994. It was a batch of 2,000 cameras that they finished on January 17th, 1994. So it's interesting. It doesn't really tell you much about the camera except when it was made, but if you're the kind of person who says, hey, a 30-year-old camera might be better for me than a 40-year-old camera, then it gives you that information for sure. So that's good to know. Now, let's go back to the finish and sort of things to look for when you're buying it. As I mentioned, there's black chrome, silver chrome, special edition titanium, things to watch out for. Now, the finish itself, there's more to it than just black chrome, silver chrome. Now, this one, the older black ones, the chrome kind of loses its sheen after a while. They go a little bit dull. So I would call this camera, this one, my own, I would call it a user camera compared to a collector camera. Because I think if I was a collector, I would want that sheen on it. They just look a little bit better. The silver chrome holds up better for sure, but the black chrome, it goes a little bit dull unless you find a really nice one. Now my M7, as you can see, shows some details. It's got that sheen on it still, and it's not as old, but the M6s, the blacks go a little dull in the color. Now here's a weird thing. On this camera, again, how old is it? 94. It still has that little piece of plastic along the bottom, on the bottom of the base plate. And I looked at I have 4 cameras right now. They all have the plastic. I think the best material that Leica has ever made was this stick-on plastic that is on the background, on the bottom. You see this all the time. People have 10, 15, 20, 30-year-old cameras, still has that plastic sheet, that peel-off sheet on the bottom. It just keeps it from getting scratched, but I just think it's funny that they came up with such a great thing. Now, as I mentioned, when I worked at the newspaper, you had a black body for black and white film, and you had a chrome body for Ektachrome or Fujichrome. And when we were taking photos for the newspaper, some of the section fronts were color. And it was this slide film, so it wasn't color negative film. And color negative film kind of was poor back then, very grainy, maybe like Kodacolor 100. They're not like modern films. So super grainy. And the newspapers, the magazines, they were all slide film. So you had to be particularly good with your exposure. It wasn't like you could shoot it in color and then run it in black and white in the paper, because there was no ability to take that color transparency and make a black and white print back then. Nothing was getting scanned in. It was the old strip-in system. So, and we shot about 1 roll of color a week. That's kind of what we were allocated. You kind of had unlimited access to black and white film, but color film was a little bit expensive, so we weren't shooting as much of it as you might think. Not like now where everything is color. And I remember probably late 80s, I went with Doctors Without Borders to Cambodia, into the jungle where there was a hospital, into the jungle kind of a thing, worked with some doctors there. I went for a couple of weeks. I took 20 rolls of Kodachrome, 20 rolls of film. That's only 700 shots. I don't even know if I shot it all. 20 rolls, that was a lot of film. Anyways, different times. So I remember going into Cambodia with 20 rolls of Kodachrome. I can't remember if it was 200 or 64, but anyways, it's not a lot of film by today's standard, where you might shoot more than 500 or 600 shots in one day. Back then, you might have shot a roll. You might have shot a roll a day. I kind of probably based it on a roll a day. Anyways, that's what it was like then. And another weird thing about the old films, I remember in high school, so this would be like 76, and I'm going to my first ever concert. That's a group called KISS, Kitchener Auditorium, KISS. And one of the guys that's kind of going with us, he's got a Volkswagen Beetle, and his older brother worked at a camera store, and he sold him some film, and we could use at this concert. It was Agfachrome 1000. Everything else was like 100 ISO, or ASA back then. Agfachrome 1000. It was like one giant grain ball. You couldn't, is that Gene Simmons, or is that a dog? Like you couldn't tell. It was just grain city, right? Anyways, we shot this Agfachrome 1000, and then we got prints made from the slides. You can imagine how horrific those were. And yeah, that's what it was like. It was what it was like back in the day. It wasn't like now where you had great films and ASA 800 or 1600 or digital. I think my digital camera that's recording this, the native ISO is 800. That's as low as it goes for video. Back then there was no 800. Like Kodachrome originally came out at 25, and then there was 64, and then 200. 200, which you could push. So let's go back again to the finish on the M6. So the M6 itself, kind of like the historical line, there was the Leica M3, and it was super well made, and people loved it, and people had lenses. It was the M-mount. And then the M4 and the M4 II and the M4P, they all kind of came out. There was a CL, there was an M5, which was the ugly stepsister of the whole lineup. Anyways, and then they come up with a camera with a built-in meter, the M6. Now the M5 had a built-in meter, the CL had a built-in meter, but it was, the meter measurement was on an arm, and that arm would flip out of the way as you took the photo. But you couldn't use all lenses because there had to be enough room for that arm to flip out of the way. So it wasn't until they came up with the M6 that they really had like the same size camera, but with a meter in it. It was legendary. Now, all other brands had it for 20 years, right? But M6, 1984, built-in meter. Fantastic. Now, the things also to watch out for. Now, the leather. Okay, it's not leather. That's the funny thing. It's called vulcanite, and it's a man-made material. And you've got to, if you're looking for a camera, you've got to watch that the vulcanite isn't peeling. So sometimes it peels at the corner. You want to, like this camera here has got a pretty nice finish. There's no peeling of the vulcanite, right? It's quite nice. Vulcanite is existing on the battery cover cap. Now, why would I say that? You've got to think of like time continuum. Remember Back to the Future, time continuum? You've got to realize that you're shooting with an M6. It's going to go on beyond you. So someone down the road is going to be selling this camera. It could be you. Like you might, like I bought this camera and I thought, this is my camera for the rest of my life. Now, 15 years later, I'm going to sell it off. You might have bought a camera and thought, I'm going to have this for the rest of my life. I don't care. I'm a shooter. I don't care. Well, you know what? You should care, because these cameras will outlast you, and your children or your heirs or whatever are going to have to sell this. So you're going to want to keep it at some kind of up to shape, like a recognizable shape. You don't want to be the guy whose your heirs donated this over to the missions and some guy buys it for $75 when you know that it was a $4,000 camera, right? So even if you're going to use it and never sell it, you've got to kind of watch for a couple of things. And one is the finish, the vulcanite. So let's say you buy a camera and it's missing the vulcanite on the battery cover. Well, how are you going to get that fixed? Who's going to sell you just the battery cover? If you send this to Leica, they're going to probably do the whole thing, right? It would make sense. They're probably going to do a tune-up. They're probably going to recalibrate the camera. Now, let me tell you my experience. When I bought this camera, it worked fantastic. A couple of years later, the film counter was inaccurate. It wasn't working correctly. You didn't really know how many frames of film you had. I sent it into Leica. They fixed that, fantastic. They go over the whole camera, bring everything back to calibration. Now this is a $900 Canadian service repair, just for the film counter. Now, so what I'm saying is, if you buy a Leica and it's missing a part or something you know ahead of time it's going to go in for service, this is going to be expensive. I'm not saying it's going to be $900. It might be, though. It's not going to be $45. It could be $2,000. I don't know. It depends on how much work needs to be done. But you've got to buy this camera. You want to buy as clean and fit as one as you can, because when it goes into Leica for service, whether it's some peeling vulcanite or the cap, vulcanite is missing, something isn't right, this isn't possibly a very expensive repair. As I said, the film counter was inaccurate and it was a $900 service. So just letting you know, you'll want to watch out for things like that. And as I said, none of this really affects the shooting. It might affect the user experience a little bit, but it doesn't really affect the shooting. But the camera is going to go on beyond you. You have to realize that. And you're going to have to kind of keep it nice, a little bit nice. Now, here's the biggest problem with the M6, the finish. So we've talked about the vulcanite. You don't want any parts missing. Hey, maybe it's still got the plastic underneath. Maybe you like the black chrome, maybe you like the silver chrome. But you got to watch for the bubbles. The what? The bubbles. Some of the finishes, like this, see how smooth this is and nice? Some of the M6s have corroded. It's called zinc rot. And people say it's caused by acid rain, and imperfections have gotten onto the zinc and it blisters, it bubbles. It's called zinc rot, and it would be all over the camera. And if you go to eBay, you will see M6s that have bubbling. And the people selling them think, oh, it's just got a little bit of bubbling and doesn't affect the use and it still takes great pictures, which is all true. But I'll tell you, that's going to knock the resale value. Myself, I wouldn't buy one with bubbling because I know it's going to be very difficult to sell in 15 years when I want to sell it. So this zinc rot, you've got to watch for that. And I would stay clear. I would expect a discount. Let's say the camera on eBay is going to sell for $3,000. I'd expect $1,500 off for the bubbling alone. Doesn't affect the shooting, but it's going to be hard to sell. Every time I use it, I'm going to be disappointed. I've got this great camera and it's got this blistering thing. You don't want to wash your hands after you use it just because it's like that. So I would watch for zinc rot. You'll see it. People downplay it on eBay, but I wouldn't buy one. That would be one of the things I would stay away from for sure. Now, as I said, people said it was from acid rain. John, the guy who I know personally, who knows the most about cameras of anybody I know, he says it's from the glue in the Ever Ready case. That there was, people buy these Ever Ready or Never Ready cases that go right around your camera, made probably by Leica, and to protect the camera, and apparently the glue in there affected the zinc. That's his theory on it, but there might be some truth to that. I don't really know, but apparently it's if the camera's like in a humid place. It's not the humidity really that is doing this. It's not like the humidity as much as this zinc rot. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it bubbles, it's blistering. Now, if you use the camera a lot and you don't put it in a Never Ready case and you keep it out in the open, in the clean air and the away from humidity, it will stop. It won't zinc rot more. But that would be the one thing I would watch out for. Watch out for the bubbles. Now, there is another version of the M6. Again, this was part of the updates, not a special edition. But you'll see it on eBay. It doesn't really charge a premium. It's called the Panda. And, okay, there was a version that was a collector's item, like for the World Wildlife Federation, with a panda on it. That's not what I'm talking about. People call their camera the Panda. It was a silver chrome camera, and all of the accessories, the shutter dial, the rewind dial, the little levers, they were all black. So you had a silver chrome camera with black accessories. They called that the Panda. It's not a special edition. I wouldn't pay a premium for it. I wouldn't buy one because I don't think they're as attractive. But there is a camera called the Panda. Maybe that is something that you're going to see on eBay, and that's what that means. Silver camera with the black trimming. It was done at the factory. They never really gave a good reason why they did that. I've never heard a good reason why they've done that. It wasn't something that the user did and sent back in and upgraded to make it black. It was at factory, that's how it came out. But that's the Panda version. So you're going to buy your M6 and you've decided on black chrome or silver chrome. As I said, the silver seems to hold up and look better longer, but mine are mostly black. Now, the next thing is in the viewfinder. And if you go on eBay, you're going to see, it's going to tell you the viewfinder. It's going to have a number like 72. Now, what does that mean? So when your camera originally came out, the viewfinder, I guess it's an angle of view of 72, maybe. But anyways, they call it a 72. And it shows, because you're looking through a window, You're not looking through the lens. You're looking through a window on a rangefinder. And inside the window are little square boxes or corners. And they come in pairs. So there's 6 frame lines in the viewfinder, and they're 3 different sets. And if you put on a 28mm lens, it shows the 28mm viewfinders. In fact, when you put on a 28, it shows the 28 viewfinders, also shows the 90 viewfinders. If you put on a 35mm, it shows the 35 viewfinder lines and the 135. And if you put on a 50, it shows the 50 and the 75. So there's the box for the 50, and inside that's the smaller area that the 75 would be seen. So the M6, the M4P, they had 6 viewfinder lines. That was the most. And that's with a 72 viewfinder. So on eBay, it'll say 72. Now, what other numbers were they? Well, they came out with special editions that had 85. So the viewfinder wasn't 72, it was 85. So the whole, as you're looking through it, it was a little bit more magnified. Now, with the 72, the widest lines are the 28. But with glasses that are a little bit hard to see, you kind of have to get in there and look around a bit. So with the 28, the lines are hard to see. Now, if you get this 85 viewfinder, there is no 28 lines because everything is brought a little bit closer. So the 85 only has 5 viewfinder lines. It drops off the 28. And it's a little bit more accurate because everything is enlarged a little bit. So of the viewfinders, the 85 is best, most critical focus. And towards the end of the M6, they came out with special editions with this 85 viewfinder. Now, at the end of the M6 line, I realized there's a new M6 out. I'll get to that. But at the end of the M6 line, they started to switch to the M6 TTL, which was not an upgrade. It was a totally different camera. I'll talk about that. But the M6 TTL came in easier in different viewfinder sizes. So there was the regular 72, then there was this 85, and then there was a 58. Now the 58, again, only shows 5 lines. It's a little wider. It's a little less accurate, they say. It's also my favorite. It's because I use a 28 a lot. It's easier to see the lines for the 28. It's amazing with the 35 because the 35 is paired with the 135, but they dropped off the 135 because it's so wide. The 135 would be so small, it'd be useless anyways. But now when you look through the camera with the 35mm lens on it, you just see the perfect one set of viewfinder lines. It's just simpler and easier and nicer and more wonderful. So I like the 58 the best. People say the 85 is a little more accurate for critical focusing. 72 is the norm. There's more cameras with the 72, especially M6 Classics. There's way more M6 Classics with the 72. Then they added the 85 on some special editions kind of towards the end of life. And then there were, people could get it modified at Leica. Once they came out with the M6 TTL, people would send their M6 Classics in and get them modified to the other viewfinder that they preferred. So there'd be few of those around, but there would be some. Yeah, and those cameras, like an M6 Classic with the 85 viewfinder, that'd be kind of like around 1998 that they came out with that. And then they really started to switch to the M6 TTL. They never made both cameras at the same time. Now, another thing with these viewfinders is, well, what do you do if you want to use a different lens that doesn't have a viewfinder, right? And how does that all work? So there was a sit-on-top viewfinder that slid into the hot shoe. See, the hot shoe is not really for flash because Leica users don't use flash that much. It would be great for this viewfinder, right? So the viewfinder sits on top. Now you focus through the conventional viewfinder and you frame through this sit-on-top viewfinder. So let's say you had a 21mm lens, you would get a 21 viewfinder, focus over here, compose over here, like it's hard to explain that to an SLR user because it just sounds so ridiculous. So you look through one viewfinder to focus and do your meter setting, but you compose through another one. And I'm going to do this with a fast-paced situation. It's hard to explain how this could possibly make sense. But anyways, I have a viewfinder for an 18mm. I have the viewfinder for the 25. Leica made a 24. Zeiss made a 25. The most popular one is the 21 viewfinder. And some of the cameras some of the older Leicas that don't have the 28 viewfinder lines, there is a viewfinder for the 28 as well. So you focus on the one viewfinder, the camera viewfinder, and you compose in the other one, and then you tell everybody how fantastic it is, because it's fantastic. So that's some things to watch out for the viewfinder. The conventional classic M6 is a 72. If you're buying off eBay, it'll say 72, but some are 85s, and it'll say that, and it'll probably charge a premium because there's not as many of them out there. Again, not a collector thing. This is for shooters. And the 58 would be a little bit rarer yet, but it would say that in the description that it was a camera with a 58 viewfinder. And if you look closely on the newer ones, it says the size. When there were only 72s, it never said anything. But like my 85 viewfinder says that you can read the 85. It says it right on it. They're not hiding anything. Now the other thing about the viewfinder, again, and this does not affect photos, but I'm talking about taking great photos and not being a collector here. So the other thing about the viewfinders is you have to watch for haze. Sometimes, like I don't know if it's a mold or a fungus or whatever, let's call it haze. There's a haze kind of happens in the viewfinder. Doesn't affect the photos because it's not an SLR. The lens isn't connected with the viewfinder really. But it's just inconvenient and a little bit hard to focus. So you want to watch for that. Again, it's going to be hard to get cleaned out, probably impossible. So just watch that there's no haze. Watch in the description. A good Leica dealer will tell you if there's haze or not. There probably isn't, but if there is, I'd stay clear. That wouldn't be something I'd be wanting to get involved with. Okay, so a kind of other weird thing. So again, we've talked about the color. That's important. Talked about the viewfinders. That's going to be somewhat important. Condition, how beat up is the camera. That's all going to be important. Now, the hot shoe. So the hot shoe itself, as I said, there were sit-on-top viewfinders. Now, in previous models, previous to the M6, they never had meters, as I've mentioned. So there would be a sit-on-top meter that went on the hot shoe. And it was integrated with this small dial. So the shutter speed dial is uselessly small on the M6, as it is on the M4 and the M3, because the real photographers put this sit-on-top meter, which had a big gnarly shutter speed dial, and they would be connected. So you would turn it on the meter and do your meter setting, and it would correspondingly change the shutter speed dial on the camera. So the fact that they were small and you'd need little mini fingers to use them, the fact that they were small didn't matter because you were really adjusting it on the meter. So one of the main differences, of course, is the TTL has TTL flash. So both cameras have TTL through the lens ambient metering, but the TTL version has TTL flash through the lens off the film plane flash metering. So that was an upgrade. That was a different camera. The other big change on that camera was they changed this little tiny useless dial and made it a bit knobbier, bigger dial, and it went the other way, which, oh my goodness, blasphemy. So for a million years, Leica shutter speed dials turned one way, and then they put a bigger dial on it and turned it the other way. And of course, the great thing about it was when you were metering it and there was little arrows in that light up to show your exposure and which way you've got to turn it. On the M6 TTL, the arrow is showing you which way to turn the dial. On the M6, because they went with this conventional million-year-old shutter dial, when the arrow points left, you turn right. Because it's a Leica, that's why it's good. And it's better that way, ask anybody. It's better that way, that the arrow is the opposite of what you want to do, because that's the Leica way. So the TTL camera is not an upgrade, it's a whole new camera. It has some other advantages, disadvantages, but that shutter speed dial is one of the main ones. It's certainly the most controversy is that shutter speed dial. Now the other weird things of the camera, so this one, the camera that I'm selling, it has the incorrect film advance. This is the film advance that is from the MP camera. Now the original film advance, and if I was a collector, I would absolutely insist on this, but this is something that a user would change. Maybe this is something that people prefer. The original film advance, it has plastic, like plastic. Leica has like plastic on the film advance. Now, I've had them for years. They're fantastic. They're easy on the finger. They're not sharp like this. They're the original thing. My M7's got it. Fantastic. But on this particular camera that I'm selling, they've updated it or changed it or modified it or whatever you want to the MP film advance. Now, the MP film advance is brass, so you get this brassing. So the camera has no brassing except from the film advance, but it has no plastic. So some people prefer that. Some people prefer the conventional with plastic, as you can see on the M7. Some people prefer the one-piece metal like you get on the MP. This particular M6 was modified by the previous owner to be the MP film advance, but it is brassing. It's the only brassing you'll get on the camera because it's the only real brass piece. Is it an upgrade? I wouldn't say it was an upgrade because I don't have a problem with plastic, but if you can't do plastic, then I guess it's an upgrade. If you want it to brass, I guess it's an upgrade. If you wanted original equipment for a collector, then I would say go with the plastic because that's the original equipment. Okay, now let's talk about the meter itself. So pop the lens off. See the white dot? Now you think that the white dot shows the area that is being metered. You would think it would be bright white like a piece of paper. Well, it isn't. They're kind of faded and look worn. Right out of the box, that's how they're supposed to be. So if you look at your camera and think, well, the white dot is wearing off. Well, it's not wearing off. It's just that's how they made them, and it's fine. So there is the white dot. That's where the metering is going through. Fire the shutter. Bring back the shutter curtain. Now, so the meter itself is just metering off the white dot. So if you go into a camera store to buy an M6, then why don't you take a camera or some kind of meter with you that you know is accurate? Now, it doesn't have to be perfectly aligned with the one that you're buying, this used M6 at the camera store, but it's got to be in the ballpark. It can't be 4 or 5 stops different. So, being kind of like a center weighted meter, that takes a little bit of getting used to. As long as you're within a stop or so of a reliable meter that you're going to be fine. If it's 4 or 5 stops up, then your meter's out of calibration, and now you got to go to Leica, and now it's big money again. So that's one thing to work for. Now in the M6, when you're setting the exposure, there's a little arrow that lights up, and if you're overexposed, a little arrow lights up telling you to change it. And when both arrows light up, you've got the correct exposure, more or less. That's how the M6 works. Now, when they upgraded to the M6 TTL, instead of having the 2 arrows, they have the 2 arrows and a dot in the center. So now you're trying to get the dot in the center to light up. So you've got the 2 arrows and the dot in the center. That was one of the great upgrades. And the other kind of light that's on an M6 TTL is if you put on a flash that communicates with the camera and the flash is ready to go, there's a little light lights up showing that your flash is ready. On the M6 TTL. Doesn't work like that on the M6. But basically you've got these arrows, you're trying to get them both to light up. When you light up, you'll notice there's a bit of play if your lens, like I think this has got third stops. So there'd be more than one of those thirds that lights up both of those arrows. And as I mentioned on the M6 TTL, the arrows point to a dot and you get the dot going. Now, when you look at this camera, you can tell it's not an SLR, so the viewing light goes through the viewfinder, and the picture-taking light goes through the lens stopped by the shutter. Now, what could happen is if you lay this camera out on a table in the bright sun, the sun would shine through that lens and like a magnifying glass would magnify the sun onto the shutter curtain. And it is possible, you've got to watch for this, that the shutter curtain is burnt. You could burn a hole right through it. You could burn a hole through the shutter curtain, either in the advanced stage or in the fired stage. If you laid this out in the bright sun long enough, apparently it will burn through that rubberized silk shutter curtain, burn a hole right through. And that's going to need to be repaired. Is it a big gapping hole like a cigarette hole? Probably isn't. It's probably a very small hole. So you're going to have to kind of be looking closely a little bit anyways at this to make sure you don't have a hole burnt through your shutter. Burnt shutter, that could happen. Sun shining through. Doesn't happen with an SLR, obviously. Now, here's another thing to watch out for. This is on an angle. This is the rewind crank. On the MP, which is I would call more of a collector's item, and it would be on the older models like the M3 and that, this was not a crank, it was a knob. The crank is easier to use for a photographer, but it is kind of the Achilles heel, they say, of the M6. This angle creates a problem. So at the end of this crank, down into the camera, there's a long, thin shaft. If you bang the camera wrong, just the way you hit, you can bend this and that shaft. Now, what happens is, when you play with the camera in the store, you don't realize it. Everything's great. Yep, seems to be great. If you put a roll of film in it, which if I was at a camera store buying a camera that was going to be a couple $1,000s, I would take a dead roll of film that I'm never going to get processed, but I would run it through. Hey, why don't you just check the shutter speeds or the film counter? Make sure it's kind of making sense at the end. That was where my big repair was. But with a film in it, you can tell, is it running smoothly? If this shaft has a bend in it, it's not going to run smoothly on the advance, and it's not going to rewind smoothly, and it could be at such a bend that it just jams. So you want to run a roll of film through it, make sure the shutter advance mechanism is working, the counter is working, the rewind crank is running smooth when you're shooting and running smooth when you rewind. So watch for that. It is a problem. Then with the MP version of it, which is really just a knob, it doesn't go on an angle like this. It's this angle that has created that problem. They used it for 50 years, so it's not a big problem. But you do want to watch out for that bent crank. Bent crank. It could happen. You always want to put a roll through it. Does it wind smooth? It should be enjoyably smooth. It should be, it should be enjoyably smooth. It should be super quiet. Run that roll through, take the lens off, watch the film from through the lens go by, Make sure it's all working. Make sure that there's nothing interfering in the path of the light when the shutter's open. Make sure the shutter is opening all the way. You can do that with a roll of film in there, so why don't you do that? You never have to process the roll. You just want to run it through, make sure everything works. You're trying to buy a camera that has no service issues down the road. So, little quick review. You want to buy a camera, you're going to buy black chrome or silver chrome. You're going to buy a viewfinder. Let's say you're going to go with the classic camera with the 72 viewfinder. Hey, that makes a lot of sense. That's got all 6 viewfinder lines, so that's fantastic. So my camera has been modified, upgraded with the film advance. I wouldn't call it an upgrade, but if you're going to buy this off me on eBay, you can call it an upgrade if you want, for sure. Anyways, other things that happen, see the red dot? Now, some people hate the red dot. Like, oh, the red dot. I can't go shooting with the red dot on my camera because the criminal world will see that I'm using a camera that's so expensive because of this red dot, they're going to rob me. It probably has happened, but most people, probably most criminals, don't have a clue what this is. They don't know what that red dot means. They don't even care about your weird Leica camera. You know what it is? It's a weird film camera. Probably not a huge market for that. Just saying. Now, some people cover the red dot up. Some people replace the red dot with black dot. To black dot. To Leica black dot. Yeah, okay, sure. Anyways, it's supposed to be red. In most cases, there were probably special editions that had black, but it's a red dot. Make sure it's there. You don't want to pay full price for a camera that's missing the red dot. I'm just saying, because you're going to have to sell this camera down the road, and the guy that buys it off you is going to expect there to be a red dot. So maybe that's it. Maybe that's what the M6 Classic is all about. A couple of different finishes, lots and lots of special issues. The most common one is the M6 Titanium, which had the ostrich leather, but many different issues with special leathers and special engravings, and maybe they're gold plated or they're titanium or they're platinum, or you know, whatever, some king was being crowned and they bought 20 of them, so there's a special edition, and you see these on eBay at astronomical prices. But if you're not a collector, and I would say my camera's for a shooter, not a collector, you're going to decide between black chrome or silver chrome. Probably get a 72 viewfinder. Make sure that the meter is working. Check the meter against a real meter, a meter that you can rely on. Put a roll through it. You never have to process it. Make sure it winds smooth. Make sure it doesn't sound clunky. Make sure those shutter speeds are beautiful. Rewind it. Make sure it's winding properly. You know, is there any upgrades you need to know about? You could ask the person. Now, what about a box? Would you buy a camera with a box? I would. I would pay more for a camera with a box, even though I'm never going to use the box. And I'll tell you why. So it's unlikely that the camera was stolen. Let's say you're having a coffee at a cafe and a guy on a motorcycle rides by and grabs your camera off the table. He probably didn't get the box, right, with matching serial numbers. So I think a camera with a box is less likely to be stolen. How likely is it that this camera is stolen? Well, you know, there is a website where you can register stolen cameras and you can kind of check it against that. But I had 2 cameras stolen. This was in the late 80s. Their websites didn't exist. There was no way to online register your stolen camera. You could send a note to Leica Canada, which has changed names and hands 5 times since then. But you could have sent a note and they could have watched out if a Leica M6 stolen came in for service in Canada. It wouldn't be an international thing, so if the camera left the country, you'd never know. Never find it. So now you could do it online, but these cameras are old. This is before. It could have been stolen years ago. So you don't really know. But if you have a box, I would say it's probably not stolen, because it's hard to steal a camera off a cafe table and get the box, I think. I don't have a lot of experience in stealing cameras. Losing cameras, yes. Stealing them, no. So I'd pay a little bit premium if the box matched and it was a box. Not that it's useful to me. It's useful to know that it's probably not stolen. The M6 is a classic camera. It has a life before you were involved. It has a history. It will have a life beyond you when you're done with it. Maybe you're going to be a photographer for 30 years, but one day you're going to be done. Maybe maybe 3 years from now you're going to be sailing and you're not even going to be doing photography. Things change. But the Leica kind of carries on. It continues on beyond you. So you get, again, that's why I say you want to take care of it. Make sure you get it serviced at Leica. Make sure you got original parts. If a piece is missing, fix it, get it done, look after it, because it will continue on after you're done with it. And if you're a person who maybe money's tight or not tight, you don't want to waste things. You don't want to throw money away or leave money on the table. So when you sell it, you want to get top dollar for it again. So you've got to look after it a little bit. Make sure that it's kept in a dry place. If you're not going to use it, you haven't used it for a few months, why not just fire the shutter a few times? Keep that shutter activated, moving around. Check the battery. Put a roll through. That's what I would suggest. I have no collector cameras, so I've got film in most of them at all times. Anyways, you want to look after it. It's going to have a life beyond you. And if you get the box, just put the box in a cupboard somewhere. And when you sell the camera, find the box and pass that glory on to the next guy. A wonderful camera. It's the M6 Classic. I'm going to sell mine again. This is my 5th one. I've still got an M6 TTL. I still have an MP and I still have an M7. So it's not like I'm out of Leicas. But I just wasn't using this enough. And of my 4 cameras, it's the one I use the least. So this one I'm going to put on eBay. I'll put it in the description, and then I'll kind of mention that it's off the description if you watch this from a month from now. It won't be still available. Anyways, it's a nice camera. It's a user camera, not a collector's camera. It's got the interesting shutter advance, but no bubbling. Watch for that. This is a very enjoyable camera. You can take great photos with this, but you can have a wonderful user experience. It's a great intro to Leica, the M6. Now, there is the new M6. Leica reintroduced the M6 in 2022. And so they had the MP, which is their top-of-the-line camera, which I believe is a collector's camera. Then they came out with the MA, which had no meter, which is bizarre in this day and age. but people like it. The M4P wasn't super popular. It was the M6 without a meter. But anyways, they came out with the MA. And then they've reintroduced the M6. And it's a great camera. I don't know if there's any advantage to buying the new one as far as using it, except that it's new, if you like new. This is a user's camera. If you want to go out and enjoy and take photos, this is a good one. But there's a lot of great ones out there if you want to start a little Leica collection. I think the chrome, silver chrome holds up a little better, looks a little better as a collectible. But great camera, great rangefinder, great way to get started. Get a couple of Leica lenses, you're off to the races, you're having a lot of fun. 72 viewfinder, I would suggest, but my favorite's the 58, but they're going to be hard to find in a classic body. But a TTL version or an M7, I would get the 58 for sure. Nice, compact, enjoy it, love it. One day it will go on past you.